Thank you very much. Item 8, performance reporting. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
So we've got some new information here which looks quite interesting. So there's 4 pieces of information. Just want to give us a broad overview of them?
There's some changes arising from the new structure to the agenda. The early documents are focused on exceptions around capital and levels of service. There's a small section on 17A reviews. And we've also set up a process whereby managers who have got exceptions are present so that they can talk to you if you need to inquire about something. So there's some structural change, content change, process change. Just working through them briefly, I'm going to move through to the first report, Performance Exceptions Report. So I believe that's page 38. Basically, the bottom line of that is that levels of service are pretty steady. They're up 2% from December. They're still very close to the benchmark 85% mark. And the exceptions to those are reasonably well known to the committee. They're the ones that have been exceptions over previous months. So there are some there around water, some there about roading. Basically no surprises in those. They're pretty steady over time. I am happy to either field questions as we go or defer to the subject matter expert if there are any queries as we go.
Okay, well, why don't we take questions on, we'll do it bit by bit just to make it easier. So in terms of those levels of service report, does anyone have any particular questions? I mean, it is generally the same stuff every month in terms of the water, but any particular questions on that? Glenn?
Peter, I had a question over the level of service, maintain resident satisfaction with road condition. It's page 47. I guess I'm struggling with the fact we have one LOS to cover all the roads in Christchurch when all the roads are clearly, given the earthquakes, not in the same condition. And I'm wondering, is that the right approach to take? Do we need different levels of service, or so we know from the road maps, I think there are 2 measures, the smoothness or the roughness and condition or something about the roads. A good chunk of the city is quite different to the rest, so, and it's not confined to one ward area either, but we're using kind of one measure for the whole lot.
Well, Richard's here to support on the engineering and technical side, but broadly speaking, the answer to your question is the resident survey is only one of a number of road measures. The rest are technical in nature. That's the subjective, feedback-based one. But that survey question is based on all demographics, all areas of the city. So it's representative of the city. That's why the sample size is so big. So in terms of just that one level of service, satisfaction, the base that it's drawn from is very wide. All ages, all demographics, all areas of the city. So, but the other more technical measures, Richard could talk to if that's the nature of your inquiry. Are you focused on the resident survey one alone, or do you want to talk to the others as well?
It's mainly the resident survey there.
Right.
Because it's got one result to cover the whole city, although you do talk about the east, so...
Well, that result, though, is the result of summing up, as I said, all demographics, all areas. So I'm sure that the explanation on the sample size would be quite technical, but it's drawn from many hundreds of people around the city, not by any particular region.
Yeah. And would that be a median or an average, or...?
Well, it's the summary of all of the demographics put together. It's the total.
Mike and then Pauline.
Thanks. Just a couple of quick questions on page 40 that talks about the water supply. Actually, I'll skip to the one where Richard's there, actually. On page 41 and 42, there's the standard one, which obviously changed a bit since the last annual plan, long-term plan came through. but around the numbers of private vehicles remaining at the current levels. And obviously what we've always seen is the fact that it's hard to measure, and it's still coming through, and they've got in the actual some remedial action to actually look to address that. I'm just wondering, are we looking at what other cities are doing to measure that? Because I noticed Auckland have been measuring their transport and are doing the same thing, where they can they're clearly showing that their transport through car trips has stayed static over a number of years. Have we checked with them to see how they're measuring?
Look, we would want to check with them, so you're right. The issue is not so much whether we know things have changed, it's the measurement which is a challenge for us, particularly given that MOT have changed their survey methodology, so that's the challenge for us in terms of trying to measure that level of service. But in terms of the remedial action, yes, we would be checking with other cities, seeing what they are doing, and coming up with an approach which we think best suits Christchurch, but is cognizant of what others do.
Yeah, I guess it's just like if I can see another city showing us this data where they're not getting any increase in their car trips, I would assume therefore that we could do the same thing. And since I've been seeing these reports, again the same thing. Oh, we can't do it. It's too difficult. We need to work out how to do it. Yeah, it's just. I guess it's really important, this data, to make sure what we're doing is working and we're heading in the right direction, and it's how long this is going to take before we actually start getting the results to what we need to see.
Point taken. So I can't speak to the Auckland Council or the Auckland Transport data, but certainly in terms of developing an appropriate level of service for Christchurch, we'd look into what others are doing and come up with something which we know is measurable and perhaps is not reliant on an external body like MOT providing us with advice, and when they change their methodology it makes it very difficult for us to measure that, which is what's happened here.
And so I guess my last question around that, would there be a time frame that we think would be in a position to start measuring?
I haven't got one, but I can come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And thanks. My other question's around the water supply networks on page 40. And obviously this is quite important for the city, and this is, I guess, is around our reticulation and the damage to our network. And I know a while ago we heard that we're having a report coming through. I'm just sort of wondering whereabouts that is.
I can't speak to that, but perhaps someone from Three Waters can. John?
Through the Chair, I'm not sure which report you're referring to. I'm sorry.
Talking about leakage.
Yes.
Level of service, where we've got a 15%, and I think we're recording at the moment 18.4%.
Right. That report is presently being prepared, and will come to the next study meeting. Next study meeting, David, or the following one? Not sure.
April, I thought, but I'm not sure. I'd have to check that out, because that's beyond Wellhead's report. I think it was scheduled for April.
Okay. So April we'll get a lot more detail on actually the reticulation around the city and the leakages that we're seeing.
Okay, I've got Pauline and then Sarah.
Mine was actually on that one as well, on page 40. So it's interesting that we're combining the Banks Peninsula leakage and the Christchurch City leakage and coming up with an average. And I think because Banks Peninsula is so different, it would be quite nice to have those two figures reported separately. And I'm just wondering that, please note that using a percentage leakage as a performance indicator is not recommended in the Water New Zealand loss guidelines. Can you explain what that means?
So say that again.
Well, using the leakage as a performance indicator is not recommended in the Water New Zealand loss guidelines. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, I can't.
I think it would be.
I think it means what it says. The question is it relevant to us?
Yeah.
So the DIA ask us to provide that indicator. So that's a mandatory indicator. So that's kind of the end of the story, isn't it?
But it's not recognised as an indicator of performance.
Water New Zealand's put out a manual about how to control your water loss, and basically it talks about, and we'll bring this back in the April report, about breaking the areas into various zones so that we can actually concentrate on the areas. They're saying an overall average is not much use to a certain degree, but that's an opinion of Water New Zealand as part of the, and admittedly it's a very good manual, don't get me wrong, but basically they're saying that's not a good indicator. However, DIA have said it is an indicator that we need to do, and so we've got it there. But I do think it gives you a global picture of where we are, but you can see just the two figures there. You can see we've got a bit of a problem in Banks Peninsula maybe compared to here. But,
I know, that's why I want to see those always recorded separately, not joined together and averaged. I think it would be helpful to us. And so what you're saying is that they're referring to the average.
More useful for you also will be the zones of the various parts of the city, but I don't have that. I don't think I've got that information at the moment, but that will be one of the recommendations that will come forward
well, that's
to you
right,
in the
because
future.
I know that we're looking at being able to separate out the zones, but also can we, in the report that comes, can we see some evidence of trending as well? So whether that's trending up or down or staying the same? Or is
one of the real problems, we can show you some global trending probably. The problem is that the information's not that accurate, and we can't show you trends at a global level because we don't have the number of metres and the breaking down of that. And that's part of the discussion we'll bring, because that's what we'd like to do, is actually break the city network into parts so we can, it's a bit, how do you eat an elephant? It's a bite by a bite. At the moment we just don't, you know, we've only got one big bite. No, we don't want to eat elephants.
Okay.
No, sorry.
So
Right, well, let's wait till we get that report and then discuss that.
So we could possibly be looking at investment in upgrading meters as well if we want
Certainly
to
would,
data.
it would enable you to manage it and concentrate on the bigger areas. But there's a lot of new technology coming out there. We talked to council just recently around the temperature indicators that we've been running through and experimenting with. We've also got John's team's been doing some, help me here John, ultrasounds or whatever that have been looking at pressure spikes, and it can identify exactly where leaks are and things. So there's a lot of new technology coming onto the market that we have been trialling, and some of that we may be recommending to expand out further, but obviously there's a cost to that.
So will that all be in the
Correct.
update? Thank you.
Okay, Sarah?
Thank you. Back to, sorry for Richard, back to the private vehicle trips, levels of service, as well as the measurement issue that needs to be dealt with. Even once we have started measuring at this, 10 representative intersections, the new proposal is still that we target for growth in commuter car trips. So a more appropriate outcome for this level of service is that there is similar or slower growth in the average number compared to population growth. So we're looking at changing that level of service to target growth in the total number of car trips into town by commuters. Now, if we did that, there's actually a clear implication for costs when it comes to provision of space for those cars to go. So congestion, car parking issues, those kind of things. So I'd have a real concern if we were looking at targeting a growth in the number of cars coming into town, especially ahead of the major cycle network being complete and ahead of the new public transport system rejig.
Is this CBD or CBD?
No, this is a commuter trips.
In the CBD or whole CBD?
It's across the city, but where the PT network does the key activity centres and stuff as well. And the major cycle network does too.
Yes,
so how would that, when would that change formally come to us, the proposal?
So I think the assumption in the preamble or comments is around, well, we assume through population growth, and the reason why it's red at the moment is because we can't measure it, but the assumption is that through population growth you're going to actually increase the number of commuter trips. But the goal is to not do those through
But the goal
cars. Is not to do that. So there needs to be some rewording of the level of service and the measurement. So if the goal is to reduce or keep it at current level,
the car trips.
then commuter trips, and that can be borne out in the new level of service, but it's how we measure that as well. So we need to get accurate about it. So I don't think we're trying to suggest that we should predict for an increase simply because there is an increase in commuter trips. That's just the assumption based on our inability to measure that accurately at this point in time. But if the level of service is of the council is that you want that reduced or held at the same level, then it's a matter of how we go about measuring it.
Yeah. But whichever, you would need to measure whichever way.
Yes.
Right? So we needed an accurate measurement whichever way.
Yes.
But what's proposed in that last sentence of the first paragraph is that we have a level of service targeting growth in the car trips as long as it's under the growth of the population. And that still means more cars into town and congestion and those kind of things. Because the current one means that the car trips stay the same, but we get people to carpool and bike and bus, which has been the goal for a really long time.
Yes.
And it would seem silly to change that goal ahead of all our networks being complete.
Yeah.
It just means that we, except for a while, we're not going to meet it yet.
Yes. I understand what you're saying, and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm saying is that we need to do more work on that.
Yeah.
One, we need to come back to you with an appropriate level of service, but two, we need to be able to accurately measure that, and we can't do that at the moment. So perhaps it's something we can discuss at a future ITI committee or council briefing or something as to how you want that articulated as a level of service and how we can go about measuring it. But there needs to be an assumption in there around population growth, because that obviously does have some kind of impact on commuter trips. However, I understand that the organisation wants that to be picked up through mode shift. So I understand where you're coming from.
Thanks.
Okay, I have David, then Vicky, and Dion.
Just following up on Councillor Livingston's comments earlier on the resident satisfaction road conditions, currently sitting at 20% against the target of 38. And you've made the comment that this is a city-wide evaluation. Do you have a breakdown by ward, for example, or areas, so that ultimately, and it's something that some of us have been going on about as well, it does give some support to prioritising some areas for appeal?
That breakdown isn't part of the report, but it can be done because we know where people come from. So it's a matter of constructing that view of the report.
Yeah, I'm just saying that perhaps the overall 20% you may be near zero in some areas, and will that give you some reason or impetus to sort of look at prioritising areas for appeal?
Well, look, the first step is if you would like the data cut that way, we can do that. And there is another survey coming in May, set of results coming in May, so we could do that for that year as well.
No, that would be ideal.
Okay.
For me, it was something attached to the
Okay, no problem.
Right, so I've got Vicky, Dion, and then Phil, and Yoni.
Thank you. Mine also relates to the commuter travel on page 42. Given the council's goal of making the city council carbon neutral by 2030 and the city as a whole by 2050, are we measuring the right thing? So what would be the benefit in terms of our carbon neutrality goal of us getting out of an electric vehicle and onto a diesel bus? But it would meet these goals, but I'm not sure that they're the right goals. And given how high in our priorities climate change is, I would have thought one of our goals was measuring the number of non-emitting vehicles on the road, which we can get from the data from sales and electric buses and those sorts of things. So EV sales in Christchurch are quite high, but we don't know how they track compared to others. Should we be providing any incentives? I don't know, but we're not even measuring it in terms of we're treating all cars the same. And yet our goal is to reduce the emissions, and we know from the city's profile that transport emissions are a really serious big chunk of it. So I'm wondering if we've got the right goal here.
So the question is really, should we review that level of service or add a level of service? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really a question for us in terms of annual plan, long-term plan processes.
I think if we're going to put climate change as very high on our priorities, we need to reflect it in the levels of service goals that we set as well.
Okay. All right, Dion?
So can you just know how we service would support that? Yeah.
Or Dion and then Phil.
Okay, the first, I've got two questions. One is related to the item on page 47, the maintain resident satisfaction with road condition. The remedial action that you have there is if Capital Regeneration Acceleration Fund is approved by the Crown. Is it likely to be approved by the Crown? Because it's been some time. I just want to get some more reassurance than if, I suppose.
We had a workshop on Friday, which Councillor Cotter and Davidson attended, with representatives from Treasury, New Zealand Transport Agency and DPMC. Mm-hmm. I think it was largely positive. Their main concern of the Crown is the precedent effect, that the Crown is spending money on what is core local government responsibility, and they don't want to be inundated with a flood of similar requests from other territorial authorities throughout the country. The second issue is around the skirt work, and the fact that Skirt did a lot of work on both Three Waters and the transport network, and concerns around having the Crown potentially funding more work on the transport network in addition to the work that was done by Skirt. So they seem very comfortable with the two of the proposals for the $40 million are around safety and public transport. They seem very comfortable with those. The main concerns are around the 5 geographical locations. If you cast your mind back to the report, what we've said we'd be looking to do is go in and undertake renewals, resurfacing, resealing in 5 areas across the city where the quality of the transport asset is particularly poor. That seems to be what their main concern is about. We do have a possible way forward where we try and repackage that work so that it is more about improvements and ticks some of the boxes around safety and modal shift, and that would hopefully elicit a more positive response from the Crown and from the New Zealand Transport Agency around funding. So I can't give you a guarantee at this point in time that it's going to be approved, but we've certainly got some further work to do. So we've got a meeting set up for next week with the relevant people. We'll look to rewrite the draft investment proposal, which has been to, this will be version 3 of that, been up to Treasury a couple of times. And we'll also, once we get that back to them, I think we'll want to be in a better place to answer your question about whether they are going to support that funding or not.
So the are Treasury aware? You were in the meeting, I suppose.
I was in the meeting.
Yeah. So are Treasury aware that the grant was a grant to the city? For the city
Dion, sorry, that's not a question for Richard or, quite frankly, this paper.
Well, it's
not.
I think it's relevant because
it's
in the paper.
It's not.
Can I add to ref that? Because there was a workshop really, about 3 hours, but I took out of it a lot of positivity, and the main feeling was, yes, we want to fund this, we're going to find a way to be able to fund it. And that's what the staff are working on now. So I felt positive about it. And Mike was there too.
All right. Phil?
No, I've still got another question. Okay. I mean, I think it was relevant, but that's right. The other one that I have is around, again, the water leakage issue. If we can just ask the question around, so we're leaking 17.9% in the city at the moment. When we considered the paper on last Thursday around making the water restrictions. Was this information in that paper?
On water restrictions, no, I don't believe it was.
Okay, so because I mean that is quite relevant around, you know, we're needing to do the infrastructure repairs of the wellheads, and we're saying to people to reduce water, but we're leaking, you know, nearly 11 billion litres of water a year at the moment. So I mean, would it, if the question I have is, if we didn't have this leakage, would we still need the restrictions?
I believe we would.
So the city's using more water than we're leaking, I suppose.
Our target is to be under the 15%. That 3% would still mean that we would have to to complete our program, we'd still have to bring online chlorinated wells to complete the program.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
Phil.
Thanks, Rev. My questions are related to page 49, which is about community support and governance and the partnerships, but the measure being participation and contribution to our decision making. And I guess the target, in a way, is pretty high in terms of percentage of respondents who understand how council make decisions, and we aim for 41%. And my question really, in relation to that, is about how we might possibly improve that by way of, or say through our delegations to community boards, and if there's a way perhaps of involving citizens more through forums or some kind of assembly, so that in fact this is there's an easier lead-in for residents through their community boards.
Thank you, Phil. There is a disparity between achievement and target, and you can see the forecast is an amber, in that there's some risks to meeting the target. I think the question could be answered by a combination of heads of the organisation, in that it's multifaceted, and you know, the scope of one unit alone won't provide you the complete answer. But I have had a couple of conversations with colleagues. Some of the efforts that the organisation are making to meet this target include a wider presence on social media, the opportunity for the community to provide their views and influence decision making in, say, Have Your Say. There is I think, a very productive move from the consultation and engagement team to take consultations to locations rather than invite people to a hall. A really good example of this was the recent consultation on the QE2 management plan. It was done on QE2 with a range of stakeholders. Probably more to what you're getting at, Phil, this year community boards were engaged in the annual plan process early. They were engaged before council considered a draft. The consultation team engaged with boards and asked boards' opinion on the plans for the consultation. Before those plans were locked down, board feedback strongly supported a number of local initiatives supported by the boards, bespoke, where boards or locals could meet locals. So I think that points to where you're going. Certainly there is a role in the council's governance partnership, the delegations and the partnerships with community boards. That's scheduled for a council briefing on the 12th of March, I understand, so we can probably discuss more of that there. So the long answer to your very concise question is yes. I think there is scope there, and we can certainly raise that at the council briefing on the 12th of March.
Look, thanks, John, because clearly the efforts we make in terms of the number of submissions last year, over 10,000 submissions on our consultations, and no, it was 2017, and this last year more, over 12,000. So there's huge sort of engagement in some respect, but in fact, but the ending result. We need to improve, and thanks for your comments.
Phil, I think I could probably also add that The use of the hearings panel is increasing. We're seeing more hearings panels, which seem to encourage a wider cross-section of the community and more views expressed than maybe just coming along to a board or a council and providing your view. So I probably should have mentioned that as well.
Thanks, John.
Yes, Yanni.
So I just wanted to check on a few things. We still got a number of CSRs that we're being told aren't being measured and new categories added to the hybris system. I don't know if you can just clarify that, but things like litter bin clearing, for example, and road condition are two that come to mind.
What is this a particular page, Johnny?
So 47, the bottom target 16.0, reduce the number of customer service requests relating to sweeping a curb and channel. Comment reporting detail no longer available post implementation of hybris. Reporting for this will commence mid-January 2019. An additional category for curb and channels, sweeping requests will be added to the new request system to enable this. I'm just trying to understand how many complaints we're getting or what the trends are.
So there has been obviously a transfer from WorkSmart to hybris, and it's my understanding with phase 2 of hybris that the information that we need to accurately measure the levels of service, which are outlined in the document in front of you, will be available to us. So I think they speak to that. So starting from March, we'll have a far better understanding of the information that we need to accurately populate this report. So what we've done in the interim is simply indicate that we don't know if we're going to be achieving those levels of service, so we've marked them orange, but in the next reporting back to you we should have that information available.
But how do we, I mean, I just don't understand, how do we not have a category for complaints regards sweeping the curb and channel or for clearing litter bins when these are like basic functions of council?
So it's
I mean, maybe we need a workshop on this or something. I'm just really concerned that we, you know, like we've got a new system, the whole send, snap, solve thing. I mean, maybe a workshop would be a better way of just getting some understanding of what's happening with our technology, my council, etc. But it seems like there's some breakdowns in the system that are...
We do actually have a category, it's just waiting to be transferred into the live system. So it's simply a matter of when you transfer from one major system to the next, there's sometimes lag time between the information being carried over.
So just so I'm clear then, complaints, we will still know the number of complaints that we've had. It's simply a case of taking it from the old system and putting it into the new system. So we'll then be able to go back to whenever this reporting was and say, yep, this is our target for December, January, February. We've had, for litter bins, you know, X amount of complaints recorded.
So look, I'd have to get more details on exactly what's going to be in there, but it's my understanding from pretty much now, which, you know, the information wasn't available to populate this report for, that we'll have what we need to accurately measure on those or report on those levels of service.
Right, but if we've got a gap of like 3 or 4 months without that information, that's going to be quite, you know, skewing the results. So like litter bins, for example, I've had a lot of complaints about litter bins, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Yanni here. I suggest a workshop, 15 to 30-minute workshop on CSR requests, my council, and how this new system is working, and whether we've actually got a lag in the data, which is now going to be a gap, or whether that data is still being measured. So
and also how we can, I think the other really important thing is how we can make that data live on a dashboard so the community can actually see. We've had 1,000 water leak requests, and this is our progress towards fixing it.
Why don't we have that conversation when we have the workshop? Because it's a good one to have. Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
There are a few other things, but I mean, it's mainly that reporting. But
okay.
The CSR,
we've had a lot of time on this. I'd like to move on.
The CSR thing on page 42. The customer expectations for service response. So we're missing our target in terms of how long we take to answer the phone. And maybe that, again, maybe that's something that could be put in the whole Citizens Hub being more accessible. And yet, you know, that's showing that we're being less accessible. So I don't know, can that just be added to the workshop? Would that be a good thing of understanding what's happening there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm certainly happy. I was here to talk about that.
Okay, well, why don't you come up front and talk about it?
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is actually the level of service we have for our contact centre, so the average speed to answer of 90 seconds. And I'm more than happy to talk about it in a workshop if you want further information. But since we went live with a significant change in our service request system, which is 25% of our 520 phone and email interactions, there has been some embedding of that change, as you can imagine, the quantum of the change. We had planned, or I had planned, that part of our new service request system provides for online service, so self-service for our customers. The uptake on that hasn't been realised yet. I mean, it's early days since September last year. But as a result of that, we were carrying a number of vacancies, which I have now recruited more people for. So I'm confident that we will bring back that level of service. Our level of service has always been very good, and I think this is a result of the significant organisational change into how we manage our business.
I noticed, two final questions. I noticed there were a number of ones around where we had a target that required intervention, although the target was to have 0 infringements for things like discharge into the stormwater.
Hold on. Is this?
No, that's.
Is this the CS?
Is this
Sarah's talking about the
services?
CSR system.
Oh, well, it's related, yeah. So basically, there's a number of targets that we've got which it looks like we're meeting, but they've been listed for intervention based on enforcement, monitoring, I presume, is why they've been listed. We've heard yesterday at a workshop, people I think have sent something like 47 emails or contacts into council without a response around enforcement. How is the CSR system, or the self-reporting, or whatever systems we have, how are they relating to the enforcement in terms of some of those things, in terms of consenting, stormwater discharge, etc.? Is there any work going on between the two, or a backlog around things that, I mean, I guess you would say they're probably more urgent because they're causing a lot of frustration to people, you know, noise in the morning, for example, on consenting, or, you know.
Look, I think we're talking here, Yanni, about the phone system and the answering of requests. I'm not quite sure who you're
just trying to understand, like, if you go to page 43, levels of service which interventions required to meet target, and you've got things like number of abatement notices regarding council resource consents related to discharge from wastewater systems per year, no abatement notices to date, maintain vigilant oversight of activities to minimise wastewater spills and overflows, and you know that's repeated several times down here. What I'm trying to understand is if people are ringing the call centre and saying, hey, there's some water that's over, like it's flowing and you know it's an overflow, are we responding in a timely fashion to ensure that that gets investigated and an abatement notice is served? And is that what these targets are telling us isn't happening, or is it something completely different?
So Yanni, I can certainly talk to what happens at that first point of contact. So absolutely, as you know, our contact centre is 24/7, so people respond based on the urgency of that particular interaction. So yes, within 24 hours or within a couple of hours, we would get a contractor out if that was the requirement for that particular issue. What then happens to it in relation to an abatement notice or follow-up, then that's a different part of the organisation. I don't know if anybody's here able to speak to that. But in relation to how that is for the citizen, absolutely they get an immediate response to that issue.
Right. I'm not...
Enforcement then.
I have to say, from some of the complaints I've been dealing with, I'm not confident that people are getting a sort of immediate response to those things like water.
Okay.
Or consenting, which is what we heard yesterday around things like construction activities.
Yeah, I certainly can't speak about consenting.
Is there a particular level of service in here that you have the question related to? Which one is this?
Look, it's probably worth noting that they're all in relation to our waters, water and wastewater, not the public or the community. As to why they're marked amber, I'm assuming that it's a precautionary measure from the accountable manager but maybe someone from Three Waters can explain the rationale a bit better. They may be simply taking the view that we're not finished the year and we can't say it's going to be zero. But that's a very conservative view if that's the case.
Yeah, it just says the remedial action is to maintain vigilant oversight and maintenance activities. So, okay. And the final question was on the vacuum one, on the top of that page. Can we get a heat map, please, of where the complaints are coming from? So the area and the number related to vacuum systems. I've had feedback that there's some areas where there's been multiple complaints, multiple failures. I don't know what we're doing about it as an organisation, but if maybe it's part of the Skirt Legacy closeout report, maybe it's part of an ITI thing, but it's a new system that we've put in post-earthquake, and I really want to have confidence in it, or at least understand if there's a liability that we can claim damages from if it's not working.
There is a project underway where we have getting better information back from the vacuum systems and the management of the vacuum legs. The complaints are going to be mostly during wet weather events because we have quite a significant issue with inflow and infiltration from private laterals and from some of the installations that were done by Skirt. They haven't been what we would have hoped for, but we're working to try and minimise that and remediate that as we can with the budgets that we have.
So what's the cost? And is this something we should be meeting with central government about for the acceleration fund or whatever negotiations we're having around if we've inherited a liability from decisions that HIG made that government were in control of, then surely we shouldn't have to pay for that. Or we should at least get some funding assistance towards fixing it.
I don't think that's a question for these guys. Okay, any other questions on this?
Just a comment. I've sent you through an amendment.
Yeah, but hold on, I just want to finish the levels of service stuff, and then we're going to discuss the other stuff. Yeah? Okay, so we've done the levels of service, but we've got some other information on here. If we go to pages, so we've got page 51, 52, 53, and 54. So 54 will get to the contract renewals and the 17A stuff. Peter, the diagram on page 51, so that lays out the levels of service by groups of activities. And then we've got a heat map on the spend. And then we have a list of those various levels of service. Do you just want to take us through those quickly, please?
Sure. Look, this was in response to discussions around the new agenda for this committee, that line by line of level of service exceptions is laudable in terms of detail, but there is a need to see both, or the request was, for both service delivery and spend on one page. So, you know, something might be delivering, but the spend may be wrong. Something may be on budget, but the delivery may be wrong. How would you see both? And the answer is, from our old reporting, you wouldn't. You would need to connect a lot of dots on a lot of different pages. So the request was for a high-level view on one page of the big picture. So there's a couple of different cuts of that. One is simply how the levels of service break down. So the first one, level of service delivery by group, is simply, this is how, if you sum up all the detail on one page, this is how the levels of service break down in terms of their footprint and in terms of how they're performing. So obviously the infrastructure stuff is in the top half and non-infrastructure in the bottom half. You can see the breakdown of how many levels of service they've got and what their forecasts by managers are saying. So that gives you the first picture. The second is the heat map, performance by activity. This is just the old Harvard model of spend along the bottom and performance in terms of service delivery down the side. So obviously something that is delivering all of its levels of service will be at the top, and anything that's delivering on budget will be bang in the middle on budget. So the shaded area you see, I realise that the first time round it takes a little while to get your head around. The shaded area you see is activities that are delivering above 85% of their levels of service, and they're also doing it on or under budget. So it's the twofer. It shows you outliers, but I'd probably caution you, having done these sort of things a lot before, that the outliers are probably not the most productive place to look. You're looking for big trends. So this gives you, again, all the pieces on one page, but cut two ways, delivery and budget. The big, I guess, signal on that page is around the infrastructure areas that you see in the middle there. They're quite clustered. They're below the 85%, and they're in the overspend under recovery area. So that's the simple message off that page. These things, there's some teething issues around getting a group used to this kind of model and using it and asking the right questions. So obviously this is going to take some bedding in. I'm very happy to field any questions or step through how it works again if need be. But these are generally useful for seeing the whole set of chess pieces on one page.
Mm-hmm. The table on page 53, which basically replicates the table above, I'd say that's in alphabetical order. That would be probably quite good to have in either spend order or priority order. Because again, when we go back and look at the levels of service chart on page 51, you've got strategic planning and policy, it's got 64 levels of service. The water supply has got 22. We might decide actually what are the priority areas, because at the moment it seems like they're not weighted towards a priority.
That's right. I don't really have a priority guide to work to.
Yes. Yes.
So I think everybody would have their own view of what that order would be.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So that's something for councillors to have a look at and get used to. The final piece of the puzzle today is the section 17A stuff you've talked about, and on page 54, the contracts that are coming up for renewal. Do you want to just walk us through that conversation?
Well, at the time this was attached, these might have been more relevant to the discussion then than perhaps they are now. I understand there have been discussions since this report was put together, perhaps up to this morning. Now, the purpose of this was to say, at the time the belief was that these contracts might trigger Section 17A service delivery reviews. There's been a great deal of legal opinion since, and I believe there's still one in flight at the moment. So it may be that rather than taking the simple view that these trigger a review, the advice since then is that perhaps they don't. And I actually could benefit from understanding where the discussions have got to since this was built.
Yeah, well, I think that brings me nicely to a point in terms of what we would like reviewed, and the Mayor has an additional resolution that you want to discuss.
Yeah.
Have you got that up on the board?
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So especially around the three waters, which obviously is the priority area for us.
So, and the reason is that, because the further conversations that you were talking about relate to whether various contracts are going to be just extended for 1 year, or whether they're, so there's a lot of work going on in the background that we've only just really touched on. But, and I was less interested in the legal obligation to hold a review than the fact that we actually need one. And I've put as per a Section 17A review, just to give the context for the sort of review that we need to have. But that it needs to be independent. And the reason is that the government's going through this Three Waters review. I remain increasingly concerned about the level of influence that we're going to ultimately have over what is decided. And it is, government is talking about, well, obviously they're talking about agglomeration of services,
and they're talking about a more regional focus to delivery. So I want us to be ahead of the game in terms of looking at what all the options are, what we do, and what we could do by way of essentially defending ourselves or putting ourselves in a position where we can offer to support other communities, rather than have a central government tell us that we're going to. So it really quite an in-depth review as per section 17A on Three Waters.
Okay, so we'll ask staff to report back next month on that. So you're happy to move that? Yeah. Happy to second, Andrew? Okay. Phil?
Question on that.
Yes.
I would assume that, especially because we recall a lot of work being done on that and being involved in workshops. In fact, this is going to be like an independent review. In fact, that work that's already been done would be incorporated.
Yes, I would imagine so, yeah. So in a way, we want staff to report back on where things are at.
So it's not like we're starting from scratch. In fact, we've got,
No, that's cool. Andrew?
Thank you. I've got some questions on these Section 17A reviews, and then I've got some other questions, but we'll maybe just deal with Section 17A first, and then if I can come back to the other ones at the right time. Yep, great. So really referring to paragraphs 2.6 to 2.10 of the report, and obviously, Peter, hearing what you've just said, realising that this is a reasonably dynamic situation as regards advice on timing of contract renewals and legal advice as to what might be required. One of the things that's been requested is a schedule of all of these Section 17A reviews with their status. So when they were last done, what the requirement is to do them, and what a priority might look like, or what compliance matters might look like around the need to do further Section 17A reviews, particularly thinking of all of this landing in time for the 2021 LTP. My understanding, I just want to check that I've got this right, is that list of Section 17A reviews with status and considerations would be available for the April committee meeting. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, that was certainly the intention at the time of writing, but at the time of writing, the view was very much around complying with legal requirements. And while I wasn't privy to these discussions, it does sound as though maybe that's one goal, but there sounds like there are other goals as well about being ready for what central government may do. So I'm less certain about what the situation is with the schedule now because the criteria seem to have changed.
Maybe that leads to another question, and it comes to the point that Leanne alluded to. There are Section 17A reviews that may be required for a number of reasons, but there are other Section 17A or similar reviews that may be desired by governors, even though they're not necessarily requirements. And clearly this legal advice will tell us what's required and what's not, but there may be things that we'll choose to do other than that. So presumably, governors can choose to do reviews of Section 17A or whatever type, regardless of a requirement to do that. If there's something that we choose to look at in that way, we can ask for that to be done.
That's my understanding, and I got that from Judith, who I'm going to put on the spot and ask if she could speak to that now.
Because I think it's relevant to the first question, because before we can determine what our own priorities are, we need to see that list of potential reviews and their current status.
Well, I think that advice will clarify how that might go.
Okay.
Good.
Choose to do a review. You obviously need to consider a number of factors and make that choice.
So that comes back to my first question. Will that list of the Section 17A reviews and their current status, so that we've got the information in front of us we need to work in the way that's just been suggested that we can, will that be available to the next meeting?
Well, the list of reviews that have been conducted and their status is easily done. That's a matter of historical record from the council meeting in 2017.
Yep.
As to which ones you might like to do, I don't have any steer on that beyond the Three Waters one on the screen. So,
so what we need is a list of what's been done, what's required to be done when, and anything else that we might consider in that regard, like a list of reviews that we may choose to do, and some advice alongside as to which we need to do, should do, so that we can then determine what our priorities are as a governance group around where we want to put the time and energy that we have. And clearly the resolution we've got in front of us on the screen relates to one area, but there may well be others.
Okay. So clearly what's been done, what's required to be done, and what you may choose to do, of which we have one example, I'm not sure how to obtain the others from may choose to do.
Well, they'll be related to contract renewals coming up.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, you do have the table previously.
So yeah, if we can have that information provided to the next meeting.
Okay.
That would be great. Yeah, now that's everything on section 17A, but I do have some other questions that will, because you're just doing section 17A at the moment.
Yeah, did you have a question on this, Vicky?
Yeah, just in relation to the amendment that Leanne's moved, I'm just cautious of the concept of an independent review. Usually is done by people who always recommend that council never does anything. So I'm cautious of where this is going. I'm assuming that's not the intention, and I'm assuming the intention is that we make sure that that function is clearly kept within council. Within council.
Preparation for such a
So there will be very
debate.
clear scrutiny about who's doing the independent review, given the history of a lot of people who do local government independent reviews who forever recommend that it does not remain a function of local government.
Yeah, well, I mean, the resolution here is to ask staff to report back on a review.
on a process for an independent review.
And then we will make the decision about whether it is an independent review. Right, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Jan.
Thank you. So on the page, the contract page, it's quite good to get that's really good information, but I'm really concerned that some of the review dates are quite close to when the contracts are finishing and others are quite far away. So I don't know if you can just talk that through. You know, like we've just sort of had a workshop this week or briefing, and yet a number of these contracts are very close to expiring. So I just wondered if there was kind of a protocol in place around decision making around these contracts, around us being informed, being able to set objectives of what we want to achieve, or you know, if I just take the traffic systems maintenance one, which is now well, it's ended, and we just began reviewing it last month. It's a 6-year-old contract, and we've got traffic lights. I mean, you know, we've asked for workshops on traffic lights, but I don't know, we've had nothing. So,
to answer your question, look, this was context around the 17A decision and triggers. I don't have the protocols around contract process. I'm sure Chris Anderson could tell you all about how that works, but I'm not across that.
I think it would be quite useful, just so we don't get stuck in a situation where at a governance level we may have a different outcome of what the contract is going forward. And also I thought having the value of the contracts would be quite useful too, even if it was, maybe you don't want to say the specific dollar amount, but you might want to, you know, have, you know, $1 sign or 2 or 3 or something, just a scale, so we can see what are the really big expensive ones.
That information exists, but on advice, you can see this is a truncated table. Commercial and confidence information about these contracts was removed from this because it's on the public agenda.
Totally understand that, but I mean, there must be a way of denominating the scale of the contract, not in the specific dollar amount, but just in terms of, I don't know, yeah, percentage or whatever. The other thing was actually right at the start of this report, on page 39, I thought we were going to come back to it, but we haven't, but that's okay. But it's a really good snapshot. And again, that's the thing I think would be really useful to get to community boards on the local projects within their ward. You can see really clearly where projects are at with some baseline forecast. Maybe there's some financial information that could be added, but actually that's a really good, just simple one-pager around where things have got to. You do make reference in there to more detailed reports by the PMO. So, I mean, I just want to get this information to the boards. We've been told that it's coming, but is that Is that what it's going to look like, or is it got a different format?
No, the request on this section of the new agenda was to focus on exceptions.
Right.
So this is just exceptions to the watch list. It doesn't have the context that the rest of the watch list does, which is why it refers the reader to the whole thing if they want the big picture.
Okay.
This is just exceptions, just watch list.
So is there a process to report exceptions to the community board in the way that this has been reported to us, so they can see on those more local projects what the progress or the status is where they're not meeting the original expectation?
No, there isn't.
Well, can we get one, please?
You will get a report to the community boards. It is coming.
Oh, can we get a date on that?
You'll get it within the next 3 months, okay?
3 months?
Yes. All right. Any other questions on this, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions, and they relate mainly to page 38 and 39. So figure 2 on page 38, the blue line suggests, so just looking at the blue line, not looking at the cycleways, suggests that 50% of watch list projects are forecast to be delivered as planned. I'm reading that correctly, aren't I?
Yes, if you separate major cycleways from the other projects.
Yeah, so 50% are forecast to be delivered as planned. That concerns me. Do we have the opportunity to drill down into how we can lift that number? Is the answer more money or better project management, or are we not being realistic in the planning, or is it the planning that we need to do better?
I can't answer that. That's a complex question that's above the level of any individual project. It's actually about the capital program per se, so I think that Dave might be the man to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm approaching this from a point of view of, there's a concern around the fact that we've got a table in front of us that shows that we're planning to deliver 50% of watch list projects as planned. That's obviously taking that as a raw piece of information. You might want to comment even on that first question.
Every 2 months we bring you the detailed watch list, and it gives you those exceptions. The watch list is the hard and the at-risk projects. They are like the Performing Arts Precinct. You know about that. Once you get that list, we said it didn't change enough, and you agreed that we'd bring it back every 2 months rather than every month. This is a summary of it, so you did grill into it pretty deeply last time, and we will bring it back in a month's time. So if you look at the watch list, they're the ones that we know are going to be challenging. They are the Hereford streets because basically, and you know why, they are the Victoria streets. They are the ones that we know are going to be challenging because of resource consents, because of that. Some of the cycle lanes, as we know, we've had to go away from the railway line, and we've gone right through the middle of Riccarton, which we're consulting on at the moment, and so those are those. So we can certainly bring them up every month, but we didn't. When we talked to you about it, we agreed that they weren't changing enough month by month, and so they were coming back in detail every second month, which we can talk to them about. I think there'll be no surprises when they come back up to you. You know why that they have been delayed, and there's good reasons. Akaroa wastewater will be on there, and it's a big project, but it will be delayed. But you rightly so put it in the capital program because we have to show it been a commitment to the community.
So my concern around that 50%, is that something that we would expect to see because of the nature of the projects, and it's not as big a concern as it would appear just looking at the raw graph?
You have picked those ones because they are the more difficult ones. They're the ones that have got resource consent, relationship issues with them and whatever. So I would say they are reasonable big projects, don't get me wrong, but they are also the ones that are the more tricky ones, and so that's why you're interested in having a better visibility over them.
So is that 50% where you would expect and we should expect to see it sitting?
I would like them to be higher, but then things like Akaroa, we're doing as much as we possibly can to unlock it. We're doing exactly the same with Hereford Street. We've done a very detailed consultation. The PAP sitting in there is another one, and I think you're pretty much aware of the work that we're doing to try and unlock all of the various things. So ideally we'd like it 100%, don't get me wrong, but the reality of is trying to slice them into one-year slices just doesn't quite work for some of those more complex projects.
All right, thank you. And then just a couple of areas of concern around the reporting itself. So there are two areas on these 2 pages that suggest the reporting or the consistency of reporting is less than ideal. So on page 39, we've got some commentary around the inconsistency of the use of amber and a comment that the Linwood pool should be red. It seems a little bit unusual that we would have a report in front of us which has got a colour-coded table, but then at the same time has got commentary that suggests that there are inconsistencies or maybe even errors in that colour-coded table. Are steps been taken to resolve this, and how quickly would we see an improvement?
Short answer, yes. The reason for the explanation is that if you simply looked at it at face value, you may not understand some of the factors involved. So it's got some context, and that context is to explain that some of the managers appear to be using yellow to mean different things, and that there's work being done to iron that out. And I would expect, and it's also not unusual that that happens. It happened with levels of service until there was a drive to communicate consistency. So short answer, yes, the PMO and city services and project managers will be working on a consistent approach so that each yellow light means the same thing.
So would we expect to have that resolved by the next time that we see this report?
I would expect progress on that by the next report, perhaps not 100%, but usually it's a 2-step. You get nearly everything and then you get the last bit.
All right, well, good that it's been identified and called out and there's work going on, so that's fine. And then final question, on page 38, there's a comment declining, let me just turn to it actually, declining service delivery. 38, sorry. There's a comment around declining service delivery across infrastructure projects being masked by the fact that the level of service reporting is across activity rather than specifically to those projects. And that was because of the way that things were amalgamated in service plans through the LTP process. Is this an unintended outcome? Because it certainly sounds as though it's not ideal. And is there something that we can do about it so that it's easier to call out where the levels of service are not being met?
I think what you're referring to is what plays out on that diagram there. Well, look, I can't speak for everybody on what their intentions were, but what the situation basically is, and it's illustrated there, is that the infrastructure areas have a relatively small number of levels of service compared to the non-infrastructure areas. There are issues about yellows and reds in those infrastructure areas, but if you just look at a single high-level aggregate of the whole thing, you don't see that. You just see a single number that looks kind of okay. So it was just teasing out that below that one number of 82%, it's quite sort of uneven how things have been apportioned and how they're performing.
So in terms of one of the functions of this committee being transparency and openness and ease of understanding, by apportioning levels of service across groups of activity, are we actually making this less transparent, and is there something we should be or could be changing to make it more transparent?
Well, it's not a group of activity. The LTP is constructed of groups of activities. That's the building block that they're made from. So it's not the categories so much as what's been put in them.
Yeah. I mean, just that paragraph suggests that this is less than, the result that we've got is less than ideal in terms of reporting in a way that makes it easy to see exactly what's going on.
Well, it's the product of seeing it through this lens, which is different to the line-by-line, page-turn type approach. So I don't think anybody actually saw it this way until now.
Yeah. Okay. It is something that might bear some offline discussion, I would say. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this report? Okay, so we have a resolution moved by the Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any debate? I'm happy to put that motion. All in favour say aye. 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 Against? That's carried. Thank you very much, Peter.
Cheers.
Okay.